Hi, it's Dr. Noel Williams, Optimal Health Associates, April 5th, 2021, COVID update. Spreading out the COVID updates again because we're more in a graduated recovery phase. So I don't want to be overwhelming with daily posts when I don't think they're that necessary. So summarizing the last week, cases have continued to come down slowly but surely. 47,000, I think yesterday, 48,000 or 49,000 today. Down to about 244 cases in Oklahoma today, 380 yesterday. So we're on this nice curve down, and numbers lower at Integris. Overall doing quite well, I think. And our state, Oklahoma, is going to do great. I think we're going to be pretty much at herd immunity. Now let's talk about herd immunity again. Herd immunity doesn't mean that there aren't going to be infections, and there's especially going to be more. There are numerous infections that aren't even infections, because as you test, as the disease goes down, false positives go up. But the key concept is, if all anyone does is get tested for COVID, we're going to really be detecting it a lot more, even when it's more of a sundry case, because the first thing anyone gets who has any cough, cold, congestion is a COVID test in the United States these days. So highly likely to be tested. If we were looking back in the March and February and April, it would have been skyrocketed numbers if we would have had testing, but we don't. So again, it's all relative. So our case numbers are absolutely coming down. Number two, where are we going to have more cases? We're going to have them in the Northeast. Why? Because they closed down more early, so they didn't get as much transmission. That results in them having more transmission now when people are just completely burned out with mitigation strategies. The people who or scientists who say, oh, we got to keep on mitigating, don't understand human nature, they don't understand science, and they don't understand public health science, which I'm going to just say again, because people can't mitigate for forever. It doesn't work. It has never worked. Give me a paper which shows mitigating something for 14 months works, and it doesn't exist, and they already knew that. So what happens, people start doing stuff, so even the people in New York who are terrified and been ruined by their political figures in New Jersey and New England are going to start having more cases, because they actually have to do stuff at a certain point, where now we're in great shape because we had some more cases. We had great healthcare here in Oklahoma. And again, I'm not diminishing what has happened with COVID, but we really did have great healthcare in Oklahoma. Big shout out again to St. Anthony's, OU, Mercy, Norman, St. Anthony's, Integris, Midwest City, Ardmore, and all the hospitals in the Oklahoma community who took great care of COVID patients and still continue to do so. But the other thing, our state's been great, running still in the top 10 for vaccinations. We've had over 1 million people receive one dose. So we're right on target to hit herd immunity any day, or next week or two. So by May 1st, herd immunity is here. And again, if you've been vaccinated, follow your city ordinances. I would strongly encourage that. But once your city releases masks, don't wear masks anymore. If you've been vaccinated, you don't need to. And that's the point. That's the point. Normalization, folks. Let's get these schools open. There is no reason for every school in Oklahoma to not be open every day. There's not a reason for any school in the country not to be open every day if it's high school or younger. There's no reason for colleges not to have classes in person at this point. That's the reality. We need these kids to be educated. They're our future. We need them not to be depressed, and we need them to feel normal again. They need to not, can't stand hearing these stories of kindergarten classes where they are allowed to finally take off their masks and no one knew what to do, from patients I take care of. I mean, it's just, this stuff has to end. Anyone who's promulgating masks past vaccinations being achieved, I just don't get it. Now, if you don't get your vaccination and you're in you're a high-risk person, you should wear a mask. I mean, it's going to decrease your risk for infection, decrease society's burden. But again, vitamins work. Take your zinc. But I mean, at this point, if you've been taking your zinc, you can cut back to a couple a day, 2 to 3 a week. If you've been vaccinated, 2 a week's plenty. Stay on your multi, stay on your D, stay on your fish oil. Fish oil turned out to be the big winner in all of this, along with vitamin D, in terms of science coming out more and more. So stay on your fish oil, stay on your fish oil. So Kim, what should I answer questions about? Because, I mean, my theme's the same. Normalization, folks. It's time to get normal. Let go of the fear. See your friends. See your family. wear your masks if you haven't been vaccinated and you're older or a high-risk person. But, let's move forward with this.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
So in your last video, you had said something, I can't remember the context, but you had made some joke about your hair thinning.
Yeah.
So from that, somebody asked if it was from COVID because...
No, it's not from COVID. It's from my massive amounts of testosterone affecting my scalp. Or it's male pattern baldness. Okay.
Well,
but COVID does result in some people losing their hair. Now, we don't know if that's permanent or not permanent, but it certainly would be highly unlikely for it to be permanent. There's multiple things you can do for that that are supportive and rehabilitative.
Well, that was the next part.
Part of that's talking to your provider. I mean, obviously, nutrition, zinc, omega-3, iodine are all very important. There's other techniques for rehabilitation of hair that are a little bit more, let's see, would be the right way to put this. Not FDA approved, but FDA allowed. There's derivatives of stem cells, PRP, platelet-rich plasma injections. There's lots and lots of stuff. But you always think it's probably going to be temporary. It's still horrible, but it's going to get better. And take your nutrition, take your supplements, nourish the hair follicle.
Okay. What are your thoughts on people getting COVID after the vaccine?
People getting COVID after the vaccine, once they're 14 days out, is incredibly rare. If you look at the people who do get COVID after 14 days, or 12 to 14 days after their vaccine, they're asymptomatic 90% of the time. They have minimal symptoms 90 to 95% of the time in the remaining group, and they have mild symptoms essentially in the complete remainder of the group. It becomes almost impossible to measure the incidence of moderate disease, where someone actually gets fairly sick but not hospitalized, because the numbers are virtually zero, and then severe disease and death is considered zero.
So on the Labcore test that you have said to check antibodies, what are the numbers that people are looking for?
Well, I think anything over 1 is great, but because it means you have those antibodies, and I think that almost always is going to give you either partial immunity or full immunity. If you're over 250, you're going to have full immunity probably over 95% of the time. But I think if you're over 20, your levels are pretty high. I mean, you look at these levels and these studies. I mean, once you're over 20, it's I think reasonably hard to get sick with COVID. But I think, again, anyone who's gotten it, or anyone who gets a vaccine and gets an antibody response, is going to be in really fine feather. I mean, I don't know if the numbers is important as, ultimately it's your immune system. Your immune system first reacts, so it has reactive B cells, okay? The antibodies, and again, we're only talking about B cells with these vaccines, but it's T cell immunity too, which is your natural killer cells. It takes between 3 and 6 hours for your natural killer cells, approximately 6, to attack a viral particle that lands in your system and is lingering. I mean, that's pretty darn fast for recognition and reactivity. And your lymphocytes, or your antibodies come up in about 2 days, very, very quickly, 2 to 3 days with the exposure. But the bottom line is this: think of it, your antibody as like a baton that a policeman has, or a nightstick or something, and that's the antibody. The policeman's your reactive B cells, who's projecting the nightstick. But then after the first 2 weeks, the reactive B cells start to become memory B cells, meaning your incident with the police has gone to the police station computer. So those are memory B cells. And then eventually it migrates over to your germinal B cells in your bone marrow, or the FBI computer. So there's programming all the way through, so you can mount a very quick reaction once you get re-exposed, or the criminal comes back. So that's not a perfect analogy, but it makes it a little more understandable. So you get germinal B cells if you get the infection, or you get the virus, or if you get the vaccine. And that's ultimately what counts. And a similar thing happens with your T cells. And we're never talking about that, because that isn't what they measure, and it isn't what Dr. Fauci and everyone wants to talk about. But the killer T cells are programmed and ready to go even faster than the antibodies.
Okay. Acute disease enhancement, ADE controversy. Do you know about that?
Yeah, we've talked about it a bunch. So it's the idea that the vaccine will make you sicker if you get COVID. There's no evidence to support that. Now, interestingly enough, there is with probably some preliminary data with the flu vaccine, notably in 2008. I mean, that one lady talked about it. I'm blanking on her name. That basically talked. It was a while ago about. She worked for Fauci and got ruined and blah blah blah. But there is some data that seems to trend that way. But again, get the data on 2008 H1N1. Find it. It's nowhere. The CDC has pulled all data. It's zero. It is not findable. If you can find it, if you're a virologist, send it to me. I can't find it. I looked for months, and it's like whatever that doctor was, the virologist who worked for Fauci, said. No, the data was horrible, and they've never published it. It's been pulled. So disease enhancement can occur with a vaccine, but there's no evidence of that. And one of those silly scientists in March who met about what's the perfect vaccine for COVID took all that into account in their formulations and have looked at that. So there is no evidence whatsoever of disease enhancement. And this is the proofs in the pudding. How many people have gotten really sick after they've gotten the COVID vaccine? Scant. There's no disease enhancement. It's a dead subject.
So what about people with weak immune systems and or sleep issues causing the vaccine not to work?
Sleep issues is not going to affect the vaccine. If you have a lousy immune system, which is between, and again, it's just bad luck, whether it's from a disease or a genetic factor, you're not going to get that much immunity from getting the virus. You're the ones who are at greater risk for getting infected. But it's a fixed number. It's between 5 and 10% of the population. So 90% to 95%, which is what, again, the data shows 95% of people have pretty solid immunity to COVID after either the Moderna or the Pfizer, and 75% with the Johnson & Johnson. Their immune systems are robust. So, that's how it is. But there's always going to be 5 to 10% of people who have weaker immune systems. But they still get partial immunity. That's the thing. I mean, when you look at the studies with people who get reinfected, 90% so if you have 100 people who get it, 10 are going to get reinfected. 9 are going to be asymptomatic. 1 will have minimal symptoms. If you expand that to 2,000, it would be 200 people can get reinfected. 180 will be asymptomatic. So that leaves 20, 18 at least, 18 or 19 of the remaining 20 will have minimal symptoms, and maybe 1 to 2 will have mild. Anything beyond that's hard to measure.
Okay. What do you think about all the variants that...
It's all meaningless. Variants are meaningless. There's no proven variant that isn't covered by prior infection or the vaccines, period. Okay, it's all baloney. It's performative, as my son Hugo would say. It's theater. It's just theater, trying to scare you. Let go of it. There will be, as Dr. Offutt said, who's on the CDC COVID vaccine committee, and one of the leads. He said, he's out of the University of Pennsylvania. Look him up. He said, there's going to be a variant that matters. Know how many have occurred so far? 0. Okay, they don't matter yet. They don't matter yet. One day they may, but that's why we want everyone to either get it right now or get the vaccine. Because the more people, the longer you give the virus time to or to infect people, the more likely you can get cross variants that could matter. But so far none matter, and there's going to be cross protection. I mean, you look at the South African variant. One of the things that happened with that one is the non-neutralizing antibodies that were formed against the original COVID that was in South Africa became neutralizing on the variant. So you can go from a non-neutralizing antibody production, because when you get a virus, you get a bunch of different antibody types, and some of them are neutralizing, some aren't. Turns out some of the non-neutralizing antibodies against the original South African COVID became neutralizing against the variant, so the people didn't get that sick anyway, who got reinfected. But again, it runs 5 to 10% get reinfected, but again, it's global, across the world. 90% are asymptomatic. 95% roughly of the remaining group who get reinfected are minimally symptomatic, and then 5% are mildly. And it's like hen's teeth. Hens don't have teeth for you people who are young. And so it's rare. Could get a moderate disease or severe. It's very, very rare. So you're fine. Don't worry. Ignore safetyism that everything has to be perfect.
Well, this is probably along that line. What about the statements that the vaccine is not going to last as long as what we're thinking and we'll need boosters?
I think any concept or discussion of boosters is baloney. I think it's, again, performative fear-mongering and control. It's utter nonsense. We don't have any proof we're going to need one. And if we're going to have to start getting them, don't do it, because it's just going to diminish your immune system. You can only get so many vaccines against a viral event. The more you do, look at the flu vaccine actual data. I differ from many people on this. You look at the actual flu vaccine data, and it's crap. It's crap. The more you do, the less likely it's going to work. The science is there. Go to the Cochrane reviews, read them. I've done it. I've posted about them. So doing repetitive flu vaccines is probably stupid, but it's, from the powers that be. Doing repetitive vaccines against COVID, I think, will be highly likely to backfire. But, hey, that's my opinion. I may change it because there's science, and I'm willing to be educated on science. But big picture, repetitive vaccines are not going to be a good thing. Your immune system's finite. It can't keep on responding. Eventually it dumbs down. And I feel strongly about that.
What are your thoughts on only getting one of the Pfizer shots? Somebody had said they didn't want to have any potential sickness or experience anything with the second one, so they only got one.
Well, I think 95% of the time you're going to be covered with one, actually. Well, maybe not. Excuse me. I mean, between 85 and 90. I think it's 95 looking at the data. But again, people have different interpretations. We're allowed to. But you're somewhere between 80 and 95. But again, you're going to only have a risk for minimal disease. The only question on that is, will it affect your traveling and stuff like that?
Okay.
Last point, CDC said all this micromanaging of surfaces is baloney. They were all wrong. And you don't need to be hyper cleaning stuff. Get rid of the robots. Get rid of the cleaning stuff. Clean like normal. That was out from the CDC today. All the scare tactics, because they were just, again, didn't know what the hell they were doing. Now they subtly mention, oh, we don't have to clean stuff, but they don't make a big announcement about it. They kind of barely mention it. So you can get over all that stuff. So be safe. Be nice. And that's it. I can't think of anything witty to say. Anyway, so take care and best wishes.